Breaking news, Crystal Palace will play in the Conference League this season after losing their CAS appeal. Hi there, welcome along to Transfer Talk. Reaction to that huge news in just a moment. We'll also bring you right up to date with the latest transfer news. And big news this lunchtime, Everton have agreed a season-long loan deal with Man City for Jack Grealish. City could lose two players, with Savinho wanted by Tottenham. And after having a window to forget, there's some good news for Eddie Howe as Malik Chow heads to the UK ahead of a medical. Nottingham Forest will play in the Europa League instead. Our chief correspondent, Kaveh Solokul, is with us. And Kaveh, bad news this for Palace, isn't it? And Steve Parish sounded quite confident going into this appeal.
I wonder, though, how confident he really was. I think he was trying to put a brave face on it. I think all along, Steve Parish and Palace fans have been fearing that this is where we were going to end up. Make no mistake, Parish and all Crystal Palace fans believe they should be playing in the Europa League. They earned their place in the Europa League by winning the FA Cup, the first major trophy in the club's history. But what has happened? They have fallen foul, effectively, of UEFA's administrative rules around multi-club ownership. If you speak to anybody in football, not one single person would tell you that Crystal Palace are part of a multi-club ownership group. Yes, they had a shareholder, a US businessman called John Textor, who also owns shares in Lyon. Lyon and Crystal Palace have both qualified for the Europa League, and UEFA have turned around and said John Textor missed the 1st of March deadline to put his Palace shares in a blind trust. Well, guess what? He's not even a shareholder at Crystal Palace anymore because he sold his shares to another US businessman, Woody Johnson. So you've got a situation now where a club who earned their place in the Europa League by winning the FA Cup have been told by UEFA you cannot play in the Europa League because you've broken our rules. When everybody in football knows that Crystal Palace are not part of a multi-club ownership group. When everybody knows that Manchester City and Girona played in the Champions League last season. Manchester United and Nice played in the Europa League. A few years ago, we had Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig playing in the Europa League. They were in the same group in the Europa League. They played each other home and away, two Red Bull teams. Yet now, UEFA are saying those clubs abided by our rules. They used the legal loopholes that we've put in place where you can get around these rules. Crystal Palace didn't use those legal loopholes.
Is that it? Is that the
because in March they didn't think they were going to win the FA Cup because they never won a major trophy, and also because John Textor didn't put his shares in a blind trust because he was selling his shares in Crystal Palace because he was so frustrated that he had very, very little influence at Crystal Palace.
It does seem pretty unfair, doesn't it, when you look at it that way? The CAS is often seen as the sort of last route, isn't it? Are there any other routes for them? Can they appeal this decision?
You know what? I think Crystal Palace, they're just sick and tired of this. You know, the fans are still angry. The players will be angry. People at the club will still be angry. But there has to come a point where you draw a line under this and say, look, we've tried our best. We've done everything we can. UEFA are just not listening to us. Yes, we're just going to have to play in the Conference League. I know that doesn't sound great, but Palace have never played in Europe before. Who knows? Maybe they can go on and win the Conference League. Maybe that would be a way of showing UEFA who is right, who's wrong. I'll tell you what, it's going to be a very, very interesting atmosphere when UEFA's, I don't know, does the Conference League have an anthem? When that anthem is played at Selhurst Park, because Crystal Palace fans are still very, very unhappy about the way UEFA have handled this. Is this the end of the road? I think in footballing terms, it is, because Crystal Palace will now play in the Conference League. Steve Parish told us that on Friday. They'll have to actually play in a two-legged playoff later this month on August 21st, August the 28th against Friedrichstad of Denmark or Midtjylland. They'll have to play one of those two teams. Sandwiched in between those two games is their first home Premier League game of the season against Nottingham
Forest. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that could make Crystal Palace fans even more angry is, how could this affect their transfer business? How could this affect the future of their big name players who are coveted, the likes of Gay, the likes of Eze?
I mean, I don't really like doing, I don't really want to kick Crystal Palace when they're down, but the transfer window is open for another 2-3 weeks. We know players like Mark Guéhi are in demand, Eberechi Eze in demand, Jean-Philippe Mateta are in demand. Those players, they'll be looking at the situation today thinking, do I want to play in the Conference League, UEFA's third tier competition, or is this the right time to leave Crystal Palace, because potentially I could be playing in the Champions League next season? I think as far as the situation regarding Mark Guéhi is concerned, I know for a fact there are a lot of clubs interested in signing him. There's been talk about Liverpool. I know other Premier League clubs in the past, they've tried to sign him. Newcastle United, Tottenham, they're all very interested in signing him. He's also got the option of waiting until his contract runs out and moving on a lucrative free transfer to big clubs in Europe next season. So look, I think, unfortunately, some players definitely are going to be leaving Crystal Palace in the next few weeks. But it's not all doom and gloom. Because I think Crystal Palace will also be strengthening their squad as well, because they will be playing in Europe. Unfortunately for Palace fans, it's not in the Europa League, it's going to be in the Conference League.
Carvey, good to have you back in the office. Been a while. Right, okay. We've got more on that news, of course, throughout the day. Unfortunately, Crystal Palace have lost their CAS appeal and they will be playing in the Conference League this season, not the Europa League. Nottingham Forest, they will be in the Europa League. We're going to talk transfers now. As you can see, Kev Hatchard and Dan Khan are back with me. We've already got some breaking transfer news to start off with. Rangers are closing in on a deal for the Real Betis defender, Nobel Mendy, and he's set to become Rangers' 10th summer signing. The big story this morning, though, is that Everton have agreed a loan deal to sign Jack Grealish from Manchester City, while Tottenham have approached City about signing Savinho. We will get onto that in a moment, but first of all, Grealish, Dan, from an Everton point of view, David Moyes was talking about he was desperate for signings only a few days ago, only a couple of weeks ago. Well, this feels like a real statement signing for Everton.
It does indeed, Matt. And I think David Moyes was so keen on bringing Jack Grealish to the club. And actually, as an Everton fan, yes, they've been wanting signings, but you now look at the attacking options they now have after signing the likes of Tieno Barry. They already had Beto Limon Jai as well. And they've also signed Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, who has a creative flair to him as well. So now you look at the attacking force. Once they can officially announce Jack Grealish after agreeing this loan for him, he just adds that bit more of stardust in that attacking flair. And I think when you look at what David Moyes was able to do with that West Ham team a few years ago, with the creative players like Jared Bowen, Lucas Paqueta, Mohamed Kudus, you trust David Moyes to really have these exciting players and hopefully do much better than they were able to do last season.
I think it's going to be about balance. David Moyes will be acutely aware of that. But Njaya Love, I think he's a really sparky player on that left-hand side. I think Tieno Barry is going to surprise a few people. I think he's raw, but he showed with Villarreal in La Liga that he's got something about him. He's got that willingness to keep working, to keep running in behind. And with Grealish behind him, potentially supplying the ammunition, I think he could have a really good season. So it's a really positive move, I think, for Grealish, who gets a bit of a reset. I think for City, who wanted a solution to that problem, at least in the short term, and definitely for Everton and their fans.
And I'm really pleased for Jack Grealish himself now getting that move. I mean, we've seen him publish videos on social media this pre-season, just trying to, I think, illustrate how hard he's trying to work to really get back to playing football on a consistent level. And you look at the last 2 seasons for Manchester City in the Premier League, just 20 Premier League appearances. Numbers not particularly impressive, but that's also not the type of player Jack Grealish is. I mean, we know how instrumental he can be.
This is it. A lot of people would say that the move to Man City just didn't work for Jack Grealish, that he wasn't the kind of player that fitted into this structured Guardiola play, that he was shackled a little bit. The view is generally that he's a bit of a free spirit and he needs to be given a bit of freedom. Do you think David Moyes might give him that kind of freedom.
Well, just on the City move, his medal collection would probably say differently.
Well, yeah.
Started a Champions League final, which he won, part of that treble-winning team. But yeah, I think, again, it's about balance. It's about finding a structure that will allow him to be creative, that will allow not the team to be built around him,